Well, good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for joining us to learn more about T Clarke, the specialist building services contractor. Just before the formal introductions, the story behind the video. We are a building service contractor, so we put pipes and wires in buildings. We take a lot of time to do tender presentations. We have to do not only the keenest price, but our teams have to put on a presentation to normally the client and the principal contractor. We put out a trading statement today, and one of the projects we said we secured was a project called KGX1. It's for a well-known search engine up at King's Cross. And part of their requirement was for our teams to present a video as part of the tender process. So that video you see there was part of the work we done to win that package of work up at King's Cross. So it's just, it's not all work on the building sites. So moving on to the formal introductions. My name is Mark Lawrence. I joined the company in 1985 as an apprentice electrician. My experience began on the coal building sites in London 33 years ago this month. But that experience has benefited me through my rise through the business, and I progressed to assume the position of CEO in 2010.
Hi, and I'm Trevor Mitchell. I joined the company only in February this year as Finance Director. For the last 15 years I've worked in this industry, the last 7 before joining T Clarke, advising a number of companies within the sector, such as Balfour Beatty, Kears, etc. And T Clarke happens to be one of the companies I was advising. So hence, that's where I got the introduction from.
So what do? In its simplest form, we bring buildings to life. We design, we install, we integrate, and we maintain buildings. If it's a pipe or a wire, that's what we do. From an electrical point of view, we will take the electricity supply voltage at 33,000 volts, bring it down to a workable voltage, and deliver it right to the end to the light switch and the socket you see on the wall. In terms of mechanical, we do the water, the drainage, the air conditioning, and the other services that make up mechanical. So M&E come together there. More importantly, as the business evolves, technology pulls it all together. So smart buildings you've heard, integration you've heard, all play a part of where we want to take the business next. We operate from 19 locations across the UK. We don't strive to be in every town and city across the UK. What we want to do is work where our client base is. More importantly, clients want to employ local people as well. So quite often it is a requirement, if we want to work in a town or a city, we have to demonstrate that we locally employ. One of the unique selling points of the business is that we employ 1,400 skilled operatives, including apprentices and skilled engineers right across the UK. We take pride in our apprenticeship programme. We've got about 200 apprentices across the UK. The slide you see at the beginning of the presentation was our London apprentices. And those apprentices will come through the business. They will, a lot of them will stay as our workforce because we need a reoccurring electricians, plumbers, etc. But also they can progress to become our site supervision, our site engineers, our project management, quantity surveyors, designers. So as they enter the business, there is a raft of careers that they may not really expect to be able to take part in. What we do, we focus on our reputation for delivery and maintaining long-term partnerships. You may have seen on the announcement today that we announced we've got a new office opened in Manchester and Liverpool. Again, not desiring to be in every town and city, but we see clear opportunities for growth in those 2 locations. And the way the business is structured now, if we do need to go into a new geographical area, all the back of house functions are available on an internet connection. So we can recruit very simply, very locally, and go into a new geographical location. But the key focus of the business is the reputation, reliability, dependency, and the people that we employ. 2 things to take away from this slide. We have 5 target markets that we will take you through a little bit later, just give you examples of what they are. We've said before that we are a building services contractor. We focus on M&E contracting and technologies. So there's 5 areas of the construction sector that we target. Infrastructure, residential and accommodation, which was a traditional part of the business. FM frameworks, etc., give us recurring revenues. Technologies is the new area of growth that we're seeking, underpinned by the traditional markets of M&E contracting. But key to us is the customer relationships. If you look across there, the blue chip clients that we work with. We are selective who we work with. We have criteria who we work with in terms of, can that contractor build the building? We're one of the first on the site and we're one of the last off the site. We have to work with builders who build. Equally as important, we want to work with builders and clients who pay us. So we build long-term relationships. We don't want to do it one job, that's it. We build long-term relationships. But examples of where you may have found us or come across us in your life, just some quick examples. In leisure, T Clarke was responsible for the O2 Arena. We've done the Grove Golf Club in Watford. We've done the Olympic Stadium both in 1948 and 2012. We did the London Eye, the London Aquarium. We did both Westfield shopping centres in London. The Waitrose stores and John Lewis stores you see up and down the country are probably done by us. In media, we work for the BBC, ITV, ITN, Channel 4, Channel 5, as well as Sky and CNN. But we also work for high-tech companies. At Battersea, we're involved with Apple's new HQ. We've just finished Facebook's new HQ in Oxford Street. As I mentioned earlier, KGX1 is for a famous search engine. And in residential schemes, in Scotland, we're probably the biggest supplier of M&E services to the house builders in Scotland, as well as doing luxury accommodation and student accommodation across the country. Big financial institutions, both in the city and in Canary Wharf, many of them have been our clients, most recently Bloomberg and Schroders. And we're unrivaled in towers. Most of the towers at Canary Wharf we was involved with, but a new tower's going up in the city. So the Shard, the Walkie Talkie, or 33 Fenchurch Street, as it's known, we're involved with. But more, the current projects we're involved with, 22 Bishopsgate, 100 Bishopsgate, and 150 Bishopsgate. 3 big schemes in Bishopsgate that we're involved with. Trevor?
Okay, so timing of this is quite good. Since we put out our November update, I can give you the updated forecast for this year. So you'll see that we turn over, and we're going to turn over this year about 320 million. Our forward order book is just over 400 million. 230 of that is for next year, about 120 for the year after. So for us, that's pretty good visibility. Bear in mind that for our orders, invariably we get the order once the building has started. So these orders will convert to actual work. Outside of that, we have a whole list of probables and frameworks, etc., that we're on that won't be included in that order book. So in February, March time, we set a short to medium term financial strategy, which was to grow our margin to 3% and focus on quality revenue rather than revenue for the sake of it. And you'll see this year's results show some progress towards that. So we're expecting to deliver an operating margin of 2.7, which is what's underpinning the upgrade today. So profits, underlying profits, 8.6 million. All our regions are profitable. Don't think we could have said that in the past, but they are all profitable this year and significantly into profit this year. That obviously drives our earnings per share. It will be around 15p for the year. We do have, and we'll come on to it a bit later, but we do have a progressive dividend policy. Our cash can fluctuate during the year. You can see we do some quite big projects. Those projects sometimes require funding. We fund those entirely ourselves from our cash position. It's a project we're doing at the minute that is 20 million over 2-3 months. So very short term, very quick turnaround. Good project, but we can be cash negative to start with, coming up to quite cash positive. But we are debt free. We expect the year-end cash position. That's the market expectation, somewhere around that sort of 13 million. We will definitely be debt free at the year end. We do have 20 million of banking facilities, should we need them. Generally, they're there so that if there's a big project that does need a bit of funding, we've got the facilities in place should we choose to use it. We always take our supplier discounts, so early payment discounts, etc. So it gives you some idea. We're quite strong from a cash perspective. If you then push that into our investment case as we see it, so our strong cash position does underpin the business. We are selective who we work for. We're in a fortunate position, we can be selective who we work for. So if you don't know us, you'll see that we quite deliberately weren't working for Carillion when Carillion went pop. We do have other well-known national companies that we will not do any work for because of similar concerns. And with the margins that are available in this business, you can't afford to have a big exposure to somebody that might be in financial difficulty. So we're quite strict about that. We have a pretty prudent profit recognition policy. So under accounting rules, it's clearly we take profit based on a straight line basis. But when we're starting a job, we'll put quite a lot of cost contingencies in there that we hope we're not going to need. So invariably, by the time we get well through the job, to the end of the job, there's extra money to release. So in reality, our profit taking tends to be more on a curve. As I said, we are financially strong. We have reasonable cash balances. Our main customers expect us to be financially strong, particularly in the lights of in the aftermath of Carillion, etc. So, people like Lendlease, etc., do expect us to have a good cash position. So, it's one of our competitive advantages. We do have a progressive dividend policy. At the moment, its relative dividends are last year was 3.5p. Next year will be higher, not yet agreed at the board. So you see dividend coverage of earnings is quite significant at the moment. So there's quite a lot of potential there. And we're aiming at a balanced business. So we've got quite an amount of turnover through infrastructure, an increasing amount of turnover going through the technology side, and obviously a good chunk of turnover in the traditional M&E contracting market. So we're trying to balance it out. We're also growing in FM. But the focus of the business is very much on margin. It's a very simple message to convey to our regions that we're targeting 3% operating margin. And as I say, the full result, when you see the full results, you'll see it's working. So in summary, that's our investment case. And finally, that gives you some idea of where our profits and underlying earnings have been going graphically over the last 5 years.
One of the things people are very wary of in our sector is risk and how we manage risk. And to explain the various processes we've got in place, this next graphic just takes you through very quickly how we approach a typical tender. And no two tenders are alike, but it just takes you through sort of a window of time and how we try and de-risk the project as quickly as possible. So in terms of our labour rates, what we charge out our labour rates for, these are agreed usually over a 3-year cycle with the unions and the industry bodies. So we get visibility in terms of our labour rates now currently until 2020, and they're increasing at a rate of about 3.5% a year over the next couple of years. So we can feed those into our tender straight away. But in terms of the other commodities and how we build our tender up. So in week one, typically we receive a tender and they basically are an internet link or a CD full of drawings and specifications that our estimating teams and our engineers will download and trawl through. And inevitably clients want to give you everything so they can say you've had everything. So our guys will measure the drawings. We don't do our tenders by square foot or square metres. They will physically measure the drawings, interpret the design, and also look for avenues where we can go back and offer the client savings or better engineered solutions. During that process, there'll be a mid-bid interview where our teams will go to an audience with the client's representatives to talk through the bid, where we've come through, and any questions we may have at that stage. During that process, we will go out to the supply chain. We will get quotations. We will request fixed price quotations. During the course of that process, we also have to produce a very lengthy bid document. It tells everything about our pricing. It also it explains our methodology, how we're going to build out the job, what team we're proposing to put on the job, etc. By about week 6, the tender's coming together. We begin to analyse the tender. We look at the labour rates. We look at those quotations. We make sure the suppliers have bid what we've asked them to, because sometimes they bid what they want to bid us. So we go through that. And then by about week 8 of a typical tender process, all that's put through the machinery. Our tender price is really prepared. At the point there, directors get involved with sign-offs in terms of overhead, profit margins, etc. We'll deliver the tender to the client. There'll be a period of about 2 weeks where the client analyses it, the PQS involved will analyse the tender. Then we typically get called to a post-bid presentation where the team has to sell itself. As I explained earlier, the video we had to do for KGX1, but the team have to present themselves, which is quite daunting for the guys. You know, normally these guys are in their boots and their overalls and they're working on a construction site, and every 2 years they have to present themselves doing PowerPoint presentations. Following that post-bid presentation, there will be a series of questions and answers. There may be some addendums that we have to go back. There may be value engineering, as people classify it, which is basically a way of cheapening the bid. And then by about week 12, if we're successful, the contract be awarded. So at that point, we mobilise our team, we start the design, we start the procurement. We then will place on order components as quickly as possible to lock in the price. So copper cable, steel containment, big switchgear, luminaires, anything that has got a big element to it, we will go and place that order with a manufacturer we chose at tender stage some 4 or 5 weeks ago and lock it in. And the benefit of the supply chain we work for, they will lock in that price for the duration of the contract. So we understand our labour costs, we de-risk the material costs. The key thing then is for our teams to go and build it on site. And this comes back to the scenario I said where we have to understand we work with builders who can go and build. Throughout the process of the build construction, we have a very simple way of working. Each job stands on its own merit. Every job in the business can be seen by Trevor and his team. The job is analysed on a regular basis from the tender point of view, the cost being attributed to the job, broken down to labour, material and the overhead costs. As we get variations, we have a very simple three-month window. In month 1, the variation should have a budget applied to it. In month 2, the variation should have a price to it, firm pricing submitted to the principal contractor or the client. By month 3, we'd expect that to be agreed. And that gives us a visibility on all our projects to see how the movement is. And obviously in parallel to that, we can see the cost being applied to job. So if the costs being applied to don't seem to be in line with the tender, it immediately flags up a concern. What can we do about it? Sometimes if it's our issue, we have to deal with it. If it's a client issue, we can go back to the client and administer the contract. Equally, if it's an issue where our businesses need support, we can bring in additional support from additional regions. So we have clear ideas within the business. If there is an issue, we shout. But more importantly, we've got control measures in place that we see visibility of where potential things are going wrong, which give us early warning signs. So that's just a little snapshot of how we try to de-risk as much of what we do is what is obviously perceived a very risky sector. So the 5 sectors that we spoke about earlier, really just a quick snapshot of where we're going to go through with these 5 sectors. So the little graphs on each of these pages, the darker blue was where he was at half year 2018, the lighter blue was a full year 27 representative, and the grey is the forward order book at the half year numbers. So infrastructure, the old-fashioned term for public sector, whatever. This cushions the blow when M&E contracting in the commercial office blocks, dies down a little bit. There tends to be whatever colour of government spend in hospitals and education. We do a vast amount of this around the country. Good relationships with people like Beaumont and Kirkland, where we're doing a number of academies over the last 3 or 4 years, and they've got visibility for the years coming forward. We've just finished Stanmore Hospital with Balfour Beatty. Luton Airport we work with, not on a framework, but on one-off projects. And Bank Station, the capacity upgrade, the Bank Tube Station in London. We're involved with the Gardos, where they're building a complete new tunnel on the Northern Line to vastly improve the capacity there for that station. So it's just a quick snapshot of infrastructure type jobs. But again, these will underpin our business when the traditional M&E commercial office blocks maybe are not so prevalent. Residential and accommodation, 2 sides to the business here really. We are risk averse in London about doing very, very high-end resi. We tend to stay away from the apartment fit-outs. We would look more to do the shell and core infrastructure, which we see as more traditional building. That's not to say we don't get involved, but we are aware of the risk there. But equally, as I said earlier, in Scotland, we're one of the biggest M&E services provider to the likes of Callahome, Barratt, McTaggart and Mickle and the people up there as well. The Minories Hotel is a big new hotel under construction by Aldgate Station. And again, residential and accommodation, as you can see, plays a big part of our order book going forward, and some good opportunities. The Commonwealth Games up in Birmingham, Berkeley Homes moving to Birmingham as well, are good opportunities for us. It's the Lend-Lease team that we work with at Stratford. Berkeley Homes, we do a lot of work. We've been working with them at the Hendon building for a number of years now. So we have, again, good relationships, good opportunities. FM and frameworks obviously gives us recurring revenues. We've got some long-term relationships with Springfield Nuclear Fuels up in Preston. We secured a framework with Manchester Airport Group last year that covers Manchester, East Midlands and Stansted Airport. Revenues are a bit slow to kick off on there, but there's obviously, as we all know, every time you go through an airport, there's always something going on. We've had a long-term relationship with the US Air Force bases out in East Anglia, and we work with EDF Energy, both at Dungeness and Sizewell. And what we don't aspire to be an FM company with 1,000 white vans floating around the country. We tend to target our FM regionally or areas of the country where we can offer a service. But we do see opportunity to further expand this. Procure 22 is a massive NHS framework in England, and that runs in parallel with Design for Life, which runs in Wales. And we are on that framework with both the second and third contractors of choice on those frameworks. So again, you know, the forward visibility on that doesn't look as great, but FM tends to fall through the door on a month-by-month basis. So it's not always, you know, we don't tend to take orders unless we see a piece of paper that we can say we've won that order. Technologies we do see as a growth opportunity for us. You know, historically, we are an electrical contractor. We acquired a mechanical division in London in 2010. All of our regional operations offer M&E contracting to an offering to their client base. But the buildings are becoming more smarter. As you know, in your own homes, they're becoming more smarter, driven by apps. So what we now offer clients where they want it, and not all clients want it, we offer them the one-stop solution. We can do the M, we can do the E, but we can do the IT. And the IT cabling is a pretty basic bit of it. It's the technology that sits on it. So, you know, we can offer the smart homes, smart buildings technology that sits on it. So we aim to be a technology provider of choice. So, for example, 22 Bishopsgate, which you see there, which is the building going up on Bishopsgate, which is just slightly shorter than the Shard. Not only have we got the electrical package, the mechanical package, we've got the ICT package. We've got £1 million of equipment, for example, with Cisco, where we're putting a 4G mobile network in for the client there. That building there, you won't walk in with your little security guard. You'll walk in and it'll recognise you with facial recognition. It knows that you work on level 22. The lift will be waiting for you. And when you get to level 22, your agile desk for the day will be allocated to you. That's the technology we are putting in buildings. So, you know, if we can be a market leader of that and be a contractor of choice for people, that's where we believe our margins will improve, because they will blend the margins of what we offer. The big infrastructure jobs, big kit is a good margin. The M&E contracting is obviously a very established market, but the technology market is an evolving market that we want to be in. Data centres, you know, a lot of activity in the data centre market, driven by obviously what we do at home with streaming and cloud computing, etc. But also with Brexit, there I mentioned that word. Your data has got to come back to the UK, so it needs to be stored in a UK data centre. So there's a lot of activity in data centres. We've currently got 3 on the go at the moment, including the one we announced today at Global Switch in Blackwall. But the other aspect to what we do is that top picture there, Stansted. We're not unique in this, but we think we've got something that is unique in terms of our offering to our clients. So our Stansted facility is about 26,000 square foot, where we can offer prefabrication of our services. So to put that into context, if you've got a building that goes 50 or 60 floors up, we can build it off-site in 5-10 metre lengths, you know, whatever the road constraints or the building constraints are, huge sways or installation. So it means we can build it in a factory environment, we can build it more safely, and build it to a higher level of quality. That was one of the winning pitches that we won KGX1, because we could demonstrate to our client, not only did we have our direct workforce to install it, we also had our own facility, so we were in control of our destiny in terms of our installation. And finally, M&E contracting. That top picture there is KGX1. So if you go to King's Cross, that huge hole in the ground. It's described as a shard on its back. That's where we'll be working for the next couple of years on that. We're already working with a subsidiary of Google on deep mines in that area as well, so that's a good one they're in. A couple of examples, I mentioned the Westfield shopping centres. We've done Westfield London at White City, we did Stratford, and we've done the extension to Westfield, which opened in the spring of this year, as well as the John Lewis anchor store. And we're talking to them at the moment about Croydon. S9 International Quarter at Stratford, we've done about 3 or 4 buildings down there. Again, our teams have gone from project to project to project. So some good examples where the relationship is maintained. And obviously, as you can see by the charts, M&E contracting underpins the business. But as you can see from the previous slide, where technology and other aspects can feed into this business and help grow it. So our growth over the next 3 or 4 years, will obviously be more of the same in terms of what we do M&E contracting. The mechanical division in London has grown substantially since we acquired it in 2010. So by default, there'll be bigger and better opportunities there. Our move into Manchester and Liverpool, will feed off our existing client relationships, and equally technologies. As that evolves and moves on, we see opportunities there to take advantage of our reputation for delivery and quality. So in summary, Trevor,
Okay.
I'll get my voice back.
So, we think we're going to finish this year in good shape. We think we're very well placed next year, and actually, for a couple of years, we've completely sorted out all the back office side. So we now deliver as T Clarke Contracting Limited. We used to be 14 or 15 separate little companies. Everybody's got common processes, systems and controls. We've got good visibility of our revenues going forward. As I said earlier, we're debt-free, which is really important for our customers. Focused on our 5 sectors, we think our 5 sectors help us manage cycles. Cycles will always exist within this industry, but because we've got a blend there, I think we're fairly well placed. And as I said before, we've got good visibility for 2019 and indeed 2020 already in our order book. So I think that's a very quick canter through T Clarke, but we would very much welcome some questions.
Hi, thank you very much for that. Before the financial crisis, margins, you could get margins like, you were getting margins like 5 or 6%. So why have, now we're the other side of that, why are margins so much lower?
I think the margins in the sector as a whole are much lower. I think you will see, if you have a look at the sector, you'll see that typical margins are between 0 and 2%. And some of our customers on there that we showed on the slide before are actually only reporting margins of 0.6, 0.7%. So one of our challenges to get to 5% is, do our customers think we're charging them too much? Technology is helping us grow our margin, without a doubt. And we've obviously set that sort of short, medium-term target to get to 3. We don't see our long-term margin at 5, but we do see it as growing, and growing to 3 and beyond. But remember, we're then coupling that with a quality turnover book. So we don't want to be taking on work from some customers that potentially might give us a higher margin but are a much higher risk. That risk of default, is there in our industry, so we do need to be careful. I hope that goes part way to answering it, but we are in a low margin industry.
Ask a question about the tender process and pricing, and how much the margin is agreed with the client. Does the 2.7% margin cover a spectrum of some which are quite profitable and some which actually are loss-making, but it averages out at 2.7? So I'm really asking what control you have over pricing during the tender process.
We would never knowingly enter into a job loss-making. That said, there may be a job that we start at a time frame that suits us. We may look at that more commercially aggressively. In terms of the margin applied, I would say we probably applied the margin that we feel we can get away with in terms of and maximise. There are certain clients where we have agreements with, where we negotiate projects and we agree a set margin, a set overhead, recovery, a set labour rates, and then we go and measure the job together and collectively work up a tender price. But I think, in terms of the spectrum of jobs we work in, the teams and our management teams will analyse the project, see what is in the marketplace. We obviously, if we lose a tender, we get feedback of where we're sitting. But a key point is we would never ever knowingly go and buy work.
Sorry, 2 questions, if I may. The first question is about if people focus on operating margins, and we know it's a low margin business, should we be focusing on return on invested capital instead? And because obviously your numbers then look a lot more attractive.
They do.
And what's the prospect for the return on capital, invested capital going up in line with the margin? First question. So what's sort of operational leverage on that? Secondly, I would like to ask about the pensions, because I seem to remember you do have a significant pension fund that has to be funded, and I want to know what are the prospects maybe for higher discount rates, lower mortality, maybe helping the numbers there.
Okay, I'll answer both those if that's okay. So, dealing with the pension fund first. So T Clarke has a pension fund deficit of approximately 20 million, based on a long-term gilt yield, which is the key driver to that deficit, of 1.8%. So depending on your view on gilt yields, that deficit is here for long term or maybe here for a much shorter term. As a contribution to that deficit, T Clarke has put in 1.25 million this year, just on deficit funding, and 1.5 next year. There's a triennial valuation at the end of this year, so that we'll set whatever it is after that. Everything else being equal, the deficit will improve this year because we'll be moving from 15 mortality rates to 17 mortality rates. And people apparently are expecting to die sooner than they were at 15. That's where you are. The board takes it very seriously, and we are putting this extra money in. We have done some work with the scheme actuaries as to whether there's a way that we can speed up the deficit reduction, and most of that awaits the triennial valuation results. But we are pretty active on that. But anyway, that's what it is. In terms of earnings and earnings per share, I think if you do some maths with where you might choose to, we are growing our revenue. We do actually have a growth strategy, growth strategy at the right quality. And I suspect if you put some numbers together and assume margins of 3 or 3.5, you get to some quite interesting earnings figures.
Can you just expand on any correlation between the new debt facility and your sort of growth ambitions? I know you said the debt facility was for bigger projects. Obviously, you're already doing probably the biggest projects. I would say you're at that end of the market. So I wasn't sure if there's any correlation between the debt and any other growth ambitions.
Yeah. So
acquisitions. Or...
So we this year, on me becoming FD, I wasn't comfortable that our facilities effectively needed renewing in 2020. And in my view, you always renew facilities. If the bank wants to lend you money, go and renew them. So the other thing we were able to do is actually get the price down quite significantly this year. So our bankers are very supportive. We deliberately renew them on a longer term because I much prefer having longer facilities there. And we've set them with 2 things in mind. We are interested in acquisitions as long as it enhances our capability. So what we're not interested, we talked about going into Manchester. We don't need to do that on the back of an acquisition. Okay, we've got some of our existing customers have plenty of work in Manchester. We've got all the infrastructure that literally, all we did was go and rent a Regis office, plug it all in, and we're there. So we don't need to spend money on more of the same. But what we have got half an eye on is enhancing our technology offering. And that's one of the reasons why we put extra on the bank facility. So that gave us an option of using that bank facility to finance it, if we wanted to. The other thing that is around in the market is some of the bigger customers are asking for 60-day payments. Now, generally, our payment terms are 45 days. Some of our projects were on 20 days. We would never go beyond 60. But if, I don't know, say a big project in London that was with one of our key customers wanted 60 days, we have got the ability to do it if we chose to do it. So the main factors that sat behind our, those facilities.
I just wondered what the current position is in the labour market. Are you finding upward pressure on wages? And has that changed much in the last 12 months?
As I said before, the site labourers are governed by industry agreements, so we've got fairly good visibility there. A question people usually ask us about labour with Brexit. I mean, most, if not all, of our labour is UK residents, so we don't see any issues with our labour. There are concerns in the marketplace that preceding trades and following trades, dry liners, bricklayers, etc., could be affected by Brexit, so there could be some slowdown there. In terms of other labour pressures, it's usually regionalised. So at the moment, there's probably a great demand for our engineering staff in London and Leeds, where we see the greatest pressures. So we're just alert to those. We think we pay a good all-round package, coupled with some benefits in terms of, as well as the pension scheme that Trevor was referring to earlier, which is a good retention tool. But equally, in terms of career opportunity, particularly in London, we offer a youngster, a young person coming into our industry, a great opportunity to work in some of the most landmark schemes. So you couple all that together, our retention rates are fairly high, but there are probably engineering and surveying pressures, particularly in London and the Leeds market.
Yeah, on your order book, you've got 400 million. Can you just break that down into sort of how many orders is that? And would the largest 200 million be how many orders? And also just on your timeline there, just how many tenders is the board approving, say, per month? So
the board doesn't overview every tender. We delegate that responsibility to our local MDs. Certain tenders will definitely come to the PLC directors in terms of risk analysis, but generally it devolves. I'd probably say the board looks at every tender that has been accepted a month, and there's probably about 30 or 40 that are accepted per month. But that said, there's a lot of activity in our tendering departments where we may be doing cost plans for projects that don't start for 2 years, 3 years. So there's a lot of activity there as well. In terms of our win rate, in terms of what we do, we would probably, 1 in 3, 1 in 4 is where we pitch ourselves. We are quite selective again, as we've said throughout this presentation, of who we work for. We won't, if we find out we're 1 of 6 on a bid list, we won't bid it. 1 of 3, 1 of 4, is probably the sweet spot for us. But again, we always want to know who we're bidding against. Like-minded competition we can deal with. If a client or a client's representative puts a rogue company on just to drive the price down, we will decline to bid.
My colleague behind addressed issues around labour rates, and you said quite a bit about your training program through apprentices and talked about retention rates. But in these days of uncertain Brexit fortunes, what sort of proportion of your workforce are EU nationals, and how concerned are you about the availability of skilled labour in the future?
We haven't got concerns internally. As I said, majority, if not all, of our labour is UK resident and has got the right to reside in the UK. Of our 1,400 we directly employ, we've probably got another 20% on top of that we use from specialist supply chains. So we do have the ability to work out the peaks and the troughs there. So no, from our business, we don't see it as an issue. The picture we showed you at the beginning of the slide is our new apprentice intake. And as I said earlier, we've invested in our business. We can take a bit of a downturn because we've got that little buffer at the top end in terms of that. So no, we're fairly robust in terms of being self-sufficient. And from our perspective, when the market is particularly buoyant in an area, it's a selling point for us because we can go back to our clients can actually name the team they want. And not only that, we can put the right team for the right job as well. So we can match the skilled operative to the right type of job. So, it does work to our advantage when we're pursuing particular projects, i.e. data centres. There's nothing special about a data centre, but there's a lot of complex controls that have to be closed out, which, you know, certain companies are just not, one, they couldn't finance it, and two, they haven't got the skills that would give the comfort to the clients going forward.
Gentlemen, thank you very much.
Thank you.